Welcome, Pewter Report readers, listeners, and viewers to another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. I am Scott Reynolds. Joined with me is Pewter Report's JC Allen. This is no ordinary podcast, JC. This is officially the kickoff week of the NFL. And today is Tuesday afternoon. We're recording this podcast live. And JC, we are just about 48 hours away from game time for the Bucs season opener against the Dallas Cowboys.
Oh yeah, I'm here for it. I can't believe it's here. I mean, it feels like this whole year as a whole has flown by, but we're at football season now. I mean, training camp has been a blast. It's been a grind, but now we're talking about real football, games that matter. The season is about to be underway, and your Tampa Bay Buccaneers are opening up the season. So, that's always a good sign. It means you won the Super Bowl. So usually,
That's right.
We're the home team. So very excited for this week and everything it's got to bring. Big news already about the game. Jordan Whitehead is going to be ruled out. He's missed most of practice throughout the summer. Had that surgery on his labrum after tearing it in the NFC Championship game against the Packers. Sucked it up 2 weeks later and played against the Chiefs and did a pretty dang good job playing through the pain. But then started camp on the COVID reserve list, and then came back briefly, and then we finally found out, Scott, what the injury was. Instead of,
right.
Bruce would
It's
not talk about injuries.
That's right.
This team in hammies, huh?
Yeah. Yep. So he's up for the game. We're going to see Mike Edwards start in there at safety. Shouldn't be much of an issue. They'll miss Whitehead's experience and physicality, but he's got an able replacement in Mike Edwards. This guy's a ball hawk. We've seen what he can do in limited snaps. Now he's going to pretty much play the entire game. You might see some Ross Cockrell in there to rotate in as the other safety, but it's going to be the Mike Edwards and the Antoine Winfield show in the deep part of the secondary. And listen, they're going to be under fire, right? Because these Dallas Cowboys, they're bringing probably the second best trio of wide receivers in the NFL, right? I mean, we all know who number one is. That's Tampa Bay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the different challenges that each one of these wide receivers present too. They're going to have to be on their A game, and that starts with the corners as well. It's not just, the experience or inexperience of Mike Edwards as a starter. And I think Antoine Winfield will play more of that in the box role, and that will allow Mike Edwards to be that, ball hawking kind of free safety. But they've both been practicing at both positions all summer, kind of interchanging. So whatever they need, I have no doubt that Todd Bowles is going to have this team ready to go.
That's right. And we're talking about the defense right now, but really John and Matt are going to be talking Bucs defense versus Cowboys offense tomorrow. We're going to be focusing, JC, on how the Bucs offense is going to take advantage of the Cowboys defense. And when I mean take advantage, I mean like take advantage. I think that there's some points and yards to be had out there on Thursday night. But it's interesting. Let's just kind of talk about the news of the day. We talked about Jordan Whitehead being out for the game. Mike Edwards will start at the strong safety position, and they'll be interchangeable. They'll rotate between Antoine and Mike, free safety and strong safety, depending on the coverage and formations, etc. But the other interesting news was Bruce Arians today said that the player they have to stop the most on defense is
Ezekiel
Elliott, right? Not Dak Prescott, not CeeDee Lamb, not Amari Cooper. This is a potent passing offense. But the guy they got to stop is Ezekiel Elliott.
Yeah, well, it does make sense because they use in the passing game, they set up a lot of play action with Zeke's ability as just a phenomenal rusher. So it makes a lot of sense that you take that aspect away, and it's kind of a little more cut and dry for your cornerbacks and your secondary. They won't have to be, but looking to see if they're getting, fakes, if it's a fake handoff or whatnot. So, I tend to agree with them slightly. I still think you have a lot to worry about with everybody else on that field. Dak is the enigma of this offense right now because we haven't seen him since October. And granted, he looked great on pace to throw over 7,000 yards, probably when it got there. But, he hasn't seen live action. He hasn't, I don't even know what they're doing in practice. Are they throwing things at his ankle? Because that's one thing I'm going to be looking at. The first time that pocket collapses and one of his linemen or one of the defensive guys falls by his ankle, is that going to be something in the back of his head?
Right.
Having not had that, and it's the exact reason why Bruce played the starters for 3 series in the last game, is game speed. And he doesn't have that and hasn't had that in almost a year.
I think the thing too about Ezekiel Elliott is, listen, I'm a big believer in the defense is you got to stop the run, right? But the problem is just like with Tampa Bay, if you stop the run, if you stop Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette from running the ball, oh no, Tom Brady has to pass the ball. Oh no, that's kind of the curious thing about this, because Mike McCarthy will pass the hell out of the football. And that's going back to his Green Bay days. That's who he is as a play caller, just like Bruce Arians, right? They're pass first coaches. And so I get it, because a more balanced offense is more dangerous. But listen, Todd Bowles, it starts with stopping the run, right? This is the best run defense in the NFL. I saw nothing in the preseason that makes me to believe that they're not going to pick up where they left off the last couple of years under Bowles. So I guess, okay, fine. Stopping Ezekiel Elliott is one thing, but the real danger is not Ezekiel Elliott. The real danger, I believe, is just this passing attack, because any of those guys, Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, any of those guys can make a big play.
Yeah, I mean, they can get down the field. They can do the underneath routes. They have a plethora of ways to hurt you. And it's going to start up front, obviously, with them missing, potentially missing. Reports came today that Mike McCarthy, is not yet ruling out Zach Martin. We know, the protocol, you have 2 negative tests within 24-hour period. You're able to come off that COVID list. So we'll see. That's something to definitely monitor heading into Thursday's game. But, if he's not able to go and the Bucs are continuing to bring that pressure, as you mentioned, and with Todd Bowles' defense dialing stuff up, it's going to take Dak being able to make poised throws and get the guys the ball. So, the passing attack scares me, but this defensive front 7 should scare Dak and the Cowboys a lot more, because I think they can put a big wrinkle, especially with the cornerback play too. And obviously, they're going to dissect that tomorrow. I think they'll be able to really, put a stop to what they're trying to do. And it's going to rely on Dallas to get out early and, not fall behind, because I don't think this team is capable of catching back up if the Bucs are surging on offense.
I agree. If you need to surge in the morning, there's only one way to do it, or even in the afternoon, folks. It's with Celsius, right? I mean, Celsius, I start my day with orange. What are you rocking there, JC?
I got the Fiji apple pear. Bet on a Fiji apple pear
good.
kick. It's delicious. There's so many different great flavors too. It's hard to pick, when you're at the convenience store or you order them on Amazon, which Scott will tell you about the great deal there. Right. Trying to pick which one you want is so difficult because they all taste great.
Yeah, I agree. When it's summertime, I kind of go for the orange. It just, orange in summer. When fall comes, though, I tell you, the Fuji apple pear, that's a phenomenal tasting beverage. Actually, all of them are. So here's the thing. If you have not tried Celsius yet, what are you waiting for? Go to Celsius.com, click on the store locator, type in your address, and then you'll see all these different locations pop up, health and fitness stores, convenience stores, grocery stores, etc. Then go grab a couple cans, find out the ones that you like, and you're going to like a lot of them, I'm just telling you. And then go to Amazon and order them in bulk. You can even do the subscribe and save like I do. And I'm on a regular delivery. About every 4 weeks, they send me some, and I save money by doing it. So it's a great way to do it. The other thing too is, if you have not tried these yet, these are the fast bars. Celsius makes these, okay? And they come in white chocolate cookies and cream and salted caramel peanut crunch. They're both equally good. I can't tell which one I like better. It's just, which one am I in the mood for that day. But they're packed with protein, 20 grams of protein, less than 2 grams of sugar. And honestly, folks, they taste like candy bars. I'm just being honest. That's not part of the script. They're probably mad at me for saying that, but they taste really, really good. And my kids love them. And I've tried protein bars before that taste like cardboard or sawdust. These don't. So check out Fast. You can also order those on Amazon too.
Yeah,
So
and the best thing about Celsius is it's good for you. And there's like Scott said, no sugar, no crash. It's about protecting your body. And that's one of the best things about Celsius. It helps you protect your body. And speaking of protecting things, we've had our first protection list come out of the year. And I completely
yeah,
forgot Tuesday. Every year, with the new COVID rules on Tuesday,
that's
we'll have
right.
players in the practice squad protected for the week that they can elevate, and then they'll have to resubmit the list. Last year we saw kicker Greg Joseph get protected every week he was on the
Right.
team. Still waiting to see if Jose B is going to be back. I've been refreshing the NFL communications to see
Yep.
if he came back on the waiver wire, but we do have 4 players who've been protected this week, and it
Okay.
was
Let's hear him.
safety Andrew Adams, obviously familiar with the team.
Double
Went
A.
to the
Yep.
went to the Eagles in the offseason, came back here. Wide receiver Jada Mickens, still unsure about Jalen Darden if he can do it. You want to make sure you have a guy you trust on this team who can. Then 2 ones that I was kind of interested in: tackle Brandon Walton, who they claimed off waivers, late in in training camp, and then the guy they brought in through after on the practice squad through the waiver process, Dion Yelder, so from the Kansas City Chiefs. So
The tight end,
yeah, those are your 4 guys who are going to be protected this week. Could change every single week. Some of them might be elevated. It's something to monitor.
That's interesting. Good stuff. So not a whole bunch coming out of one Buccaneer place today. Their last practice before Thursday night. They'll have a walkthrough tomorrow, but in terms of practice week, it's done. And JC, now it's time now to take a look at this Cowboys defense. It's Dan Quinn's unit, right? This is Dan Quinn, the former Falcons head coach, former Seahawks defensive coordinator. He's back in the saddle over there as a defensive coordinator. Mike Nolan did a really crappy job. That's what my good friend Rick Zoyce, who's a Cowboys fan, told me. So he's excited to see a little bit more of an aggressive style of defense from Dan Quinn. And so what we've got here is we're just going to kind of go through some of their stars and some of their suspect defensive players. Now, when you're talking stars on Dallas's defense, and really it was the worst unit in the league last year. But DeMarcus Lawrence has always been a stud. 7 sacks, 4 forced fumbles for him. You pair him with Randy Gregory, who's had a really good training camp. And he's coming off a season where he had 4 sacks, 3 forced fumbles. Both those guys, they're not quite Jason Pierre-Paul, and they're not quite Shaq Barrett, but they're still dangerous. But, the problem is, JC, when I'm looking at that, Gregory, Lawrence, they're going up against Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith. What do you make of the edge rushers for the Cowboys? Because if they're going to have any success, I think, in stopping this high-scoring Tampa Bay offense, they're going to have to get to Tom Brady.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the best way to get to Tom Brady is up the middle, and that's always been the way. But even you start on the outside with the edge rushers. It's not just Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith. You have one of the best blocking tight ends in the history of the league, and Rob Gronkowski as well. So they're going to have a very difficult time getting to Tom Brady. DeMarcus Lawrence is no guy to talk bad about, because he definitely is a player in this league. And Randy Gregory still needs to prove it, although he has looked good in training camp, and he had some flashes throughout his career, but I think they're just going to have a really difficult time. I mean, you saw Donovan Smith just showing some array of new moves in the preseason game against the Texans, where he just batted the guy down and threw him to the ground. And Tristan Wirfs, he's a stud. He's just a brick wall. It's so difficult to get by him. And I just don't see them having the level of success to really rattle Tom Brady in the pocket. They might get back there a few times, it's any given play, and they might be able to make him, miscue here and there, take the wrong step. But as a consistent pass rush, we're not seeing anything like we're going to see from the Buccaneers. That's for sure.
Right. Now, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about a couple of injuries that showed up on the injury report today. Antonio Brown did not participate. He was listed on the injury report as a full participant yesterday with a knee, but the team said that he was not a resting veteran today. He just didn't participate. So I'm not sure if they're just playing a little bit of possum there, or if that knee injury from yesteryear was one of those things that kind of flared up again, because he has been solid all throughout camp and in the preseason games and playing. So I'm not quite sure what the status is there. Chris Godwin also, he was limited today with a quad injury. Now, we're not sure how serious that is. The fact that he was able to participate somewhat, I think, was a pretty good sign, because I think they're going to use him an awful lot against this Dallas defense. Let's continue to go through, but we'll keep an eye on that, and that's something that John and Matt can update you with tomorrow. And, of course, on PeterReport.com, we'll have more on that as well. But going back to this list here, you look at the next star player has really been the rookie, Micah Parsons. This linebacker, 7 tackles in the preseason, a sack and a fumble recovery. He is in the class athletically as Devin White.
Yeah, this was, an absolute stud coming out of college. Had some character concerns, I put those in quotation marks because we really looked into it. It wasn't anything alarming, and Dallas took him over a cornerback, so I really like this kid. I like what he's seen so far. I think he's a real deal. He's gonna have a game. I think he's gonna be flying all over the place. He might get to Tom once on a blitz or something, but I think if you're looking at this defense as a whole, I think that's the guy you got to worry about, Micah Parsons. You got to know where he is at all times, and Tom Brady's going to hate it because he's in one of those traditional linebacker numbers, so he's going to have to try to find him and locate him all at all times. But I think this guy, we're going to see why he was rated so highly in the draft.
If I'm Dan Quinn, knowing that Tom Brady, if I sit back with my porous secondary, and that's exactly what the Cowboys have, they've got a very porous secondary. If I'm sitting back and I'm giving Tom time to throw, he is going to find somebody, whether it's Godwin, Evans, Gronkowski, Giovanni Bernard out of the backfield, whoever, Antonio Brown, he's going to find somebody open. So the only way I think that you can defeat Tom Brady, who's also pretty good against the blitz, by the way, but you got to blitz him. You got to put some pressure on him. And you mentioned blitzing up the middle. And we've seen in the preseason, Micah Parsons rush from the outside. We've seen him come from the inside. So I think that he's a chess piece that Dan Quinn can use to really kind of move around that second level of the defense, maybe even put him on the line of scrimmage at times.
Yeah.
And get after Brady.
Yeah, I mean, that's because if you look at the defensive tackles for Dallas on the interior, obviously they're not on your list of star players, and there's a reason for that. They're not
Watkins,
great.
And then the rookie, it was a Digazua.
Yes, exactly. God bless you. But it's gonna take some creativity from Dan Quinn, and I didn't get to ask Tom Brady this, but he's gone against Dan Quinn's defenses multiple times as a defensive coordinator and as a head coach. You look at the Seattle Seahawks. He's in the Super Bowl, obviously in the Super Bowl against Dan Quinn in last year.
But did not really last year, because Dan Quinn was fired by the time the Bucs played him.
That's right. Yes, because they played at the end of the season.
Yeah, it was the Raheem Morris.
Yes, it was the Raheem
Atlanta
Morris.
Falcons.
Yeah.
So
still traces maybe of that defense, but it's going to be interesting to see how they choose to attack that, because the defensive tackles just aren't enough, I think, to put enough pressure on there.
Right.
And how he uses a guy like Micah Parsons and a guy like Jalen Smith and even Keanu Neal to try to put extra pressure coming from the inside, because as we know, going all the way back to that, near perfect season for the Patriots, up the middle is really where try to get at Tom Brady. He can make those, he's got this innate ability to just sense the rush on either side of him and just take that quick little sidestep, or, just make it look so easy and just avoid that, those edge rushers. But up the middle, if you can get to him, it really can throw him off his game. So I think you're exactly right. Expect Micah Parsons to be doing some stunts up the middle and try to, get guys rushing him there as much as possible in this game.
Totally agree. And you mentioned those defensive tackles, and it's interesting because Odigizua, the rookie out of UCLA, 6'2", 280. He's a very undersized guy. His backup, Quinton Bohanna, is 6'4", 360. So there's an 80-pound differential there. Dan Quinn has got a lot of different bodies up there. Even Brent Urban, who was former Baltimore Raven, 6'7", 295, right? He's 5 inches taller than Odigizua. So there's some different pieces that they can put in that defensive line to give the Bucs some different looks. Carlos Watkins, probably their best defensive lineman, but according to Pro Football Focus, Carlos Watkins was ranked 114th out of 126 defensive linemen last year. So not very good.
No, not at all. And I've heard good things about Osa from some of the Cowboys, fans and podcasters that I've spoken to. But he's mostly going to be a guy who's going to, in the Khalil Davis mold, who's going to be more of your third down rushing guy.
He's not a nickel rush guy.
Exactly. So, I mean, it's going to be really, I think it's going to be tough for them not only to apply pressure to Tom Brady, but also stop the run, they're going to have to rely heavily on their linebackers to really try to contain this Buccaneers running game, which I think is underrated.
Yeah, boy, you mentioned linebackers. All of a sudden, Dallas decides to go on a draft binge at the linebacker position, even though they'd already had some high draft picks invested in the likes of Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch. Now, the problem is Smith is getting phased out, right? He was ranked by Pro Football Focus as the 44th out of 83rd, or out of 83 linebackers. Leighton Vander Esch was ranked 53rd, so a little bit less than that. So when you look at those particular players, and we've got Smith on the suspect defensive players for a reason, 112 tackles, 2 sacks, interception. He's basically a first and second down kind of guy. He's not a player that is going to see a lot of action, I think, because the Bucs are probably going to be in a lot of 3 wide receiver sets. And why wouldn't you, JC, with Antonio Brown, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans? Then you put them out there with Rob Gronkowski and Rojo. I think you're going to see an awful lot of that personnel grouping. That's 11 personnel. You're going to see a lot of that against the Cowboys. And that's going to force, I think, Jalen Smith to not play a bunch, but he is a decent blitzer. But really the 2 guys you're going to see at the linebacker level, not so much of Leighton Vander Esch, not so much of Jalen Smith. You're going to see Keanu Neal, who's made the switch from being a safety in Atlanta, a strong safety, to middle linebacker. So you're going to see more of Keanu Neal and Micah Parsons as those 2 nickel linebackers going up against this Buccaneer defense when they go to 11 personnel, which I think they're going to do an awful lot of.
Yeah, and it makes sense too. You mentioned Vander Esch, who's been plagued with injuries. Jalen Smith, obviously had the big injury coming out. He's been nicked up as well. But if Jalen Smith is out there on any obviously passing downs, that's who you're going towards. He's a liability in coverage for them, as you mentioned. He's a 1-2 down linebacker, if that. You look at the numbers that he put up last year, and you look at that and okay, that's pretty good. But as a guy who's going to have to go into coverage, you ask him to cover Giovanni Bernard, OJ Howard, Gronk. It's an unfair advantage for the Bucs right there, certainly. So I agree. I mean, I think you're going to look at Keanu Neal. He offers another level of athleticism. Still learning the position as he's making that switch, but he's with a guy who's comfortable with him and knows him, and I don't think would put him in a position to fail. I haven't really watched how he's done in preseason, so I can't really comment on how he's making that switch. But I think with those 2 guys in that personnel, you're going to have a lot of speed, a lot of athleticism, and guys who can cover.
Right. I think what they're going to do is they're probably going to use Parsons more as like in the Devin White role, more as that blitzer, especially since he's a rookie. Whereas Keanu Neal has the experience in Dan Quinn's defense dating back to Atlanta to really match up against the Gronkowskis, maybe the Godwin at the slot, and play more coverage in the middle of the field. That's what I'm thinking, at least. We'll have to see what happens on Thursday. Absolutely.
I mean, they've got a deep linebacking core, but again, you have to be very strategic when you use the 2 other guys. Especially if they are in that 11 personnel a lot. Even if they're in 12 personnel, Scott, both these tight ends can catch. You're not rolling out blocking tight ends. Although Gronk likes to consider himself one. You've got guys who can go out and make plays.
Well, we talked about a couple of those star defensive players. We talked about Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence, the defensive ends. We talked about 2 of the linebackers, your nickel Mike and Keanu Neal, and also Micah Parsons, the rookie, who has got a ton of athleticism. This guy really flashed in the preseason. Looks like he is in that Devin White mold. We'll see how he develops. But then you've got another guy who's a playmaker back there, Donovan Wilson, kind of an unsung hero in that secondary. He's got lapses in coverage. He's given up some touchdowns, but they do blitz him a lot. 4 sacks last year, 3 forced fumbles, 2 interceptions. So he's checking some of the stat sheet boxes there. But the thing with Wilson, though, is, again, if you're talking about getting some pressure on Tom Brady, maybe blitzing the safety, right? Creating some confusion. You're gonna blitz Micah Parsons on some occasions, but then maybe you creep Donovan Wilson up to the line, and maybe Dan Quinn throws a couple of blitzes his way.
Yeah, you can use those safeties and cornerbacks in a variety of different ways to try to disguise and get after Tom, and that's what they're gonna have to do. They're gonna have to be very creative because this secondary is still young; it's still finding its identity. And I mean, you talk about those two guys, and I don't mean to jump the gun, but Trevon Diggs and Donovan Wilson. Sorry.
Yeah.
Donovan Wilson. And, they kind of remind me, and I'm not saying as a player, comparison, but, a young Jordan Whitehead and a Carlton Davis, 2 guys who are kind of still figuring out their roles and gelling together. And then you have some other young guys that they brought in as well. I think this secondary is very akin to that 2019 Buccaneers secondary, where they had real struggles in the first half, but started turning around in the second half. And then, you saw as they grew together, obviously we have the Gravediggers now. I'm not saying that's the trajectory of this secondary for Dallas,
Right.
but they have some of those players in place where I think it's going to take some time. And unfortunately for them, they drew the luck of the draw of the Buccaneers on week 1, and they're going to get thrown in the fire and tested right away. But Dan Quinn's going to have to be very creative when disguising and showing different looks for Tom Brady to make him have miscues. And, we've talked about this all offseason, is the only way this Buccaneers team really is going to, flounder this season is injuries and beating themselves and making mental errors and mistakes. And that's what Dan Quinn, if you're the coordinator and you're trying to disrupt this passing attack, it's exactly what you got to do is disguise and make them make mistakes.
You know what else you got to do, JC? Before Thursday, you got to go to Underdog Fantasy. Okay, you have to go to Underdog Fantasy. Use the promo code Pewter when you sign up. They're going to give you $25. It's a free bonus. I've already done this. Now, here's the thing. I did an Underdog Fantasy the other night with a couple of probably some people out here in the chat that John had rounded up, and we did I think a 12-person draft. And the great thing about this, JC, is it's a draft where it's best ball, because I don't have time during the season covering the Buccaneers, having television on Tampa Bay. I don't have time to look around the league, see who's hurt, who I'm going to start, and all this. The best thing about best ball is you draft your team, you set it, and you forget it. So in other words, you draft quarterbacks, wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. That's it. And you draft a bunch of them to get through the entire season. And then whoever ends up scoring the best, you get that player's points. Like, for example, in one of my drafts, I have Tom Brady and I've got Aaron Rodgers. And so whether Rodgers has a better week or Brady, whoever does, I get those points. And it's a great way to draft. I did the draft the other night, and then I also did a couple of other drafts on there. I think I've got 3 teams now in Underdog Fantasy. Have you decided to sign up for Underdog Fantasy yet?
Yeah, I'm on Underdog Fantasy. I've been on it for a while now because one of the great things about Best Ball is it's the set it and forget it league, right? So you draft, and then they, as Scott said, set the best lineups for you to get the best points. Well, not only do they have the $1 million pot, which is absolutely amazing. They have, the puppy as well, which is a smaller pot, and not just the winner gets money, but trickles down throughout the standings. But I've been using it for some of the smaller leagues. I've been using it as a mock draft tool because, if you go on ESPN, you always have that one jerk who drafts a kicker or, someone in the first round and screws up your mock draft. So not only do I have a bunch of leagues that I mocked in and got better familiarity where the players might go, but I also am now in a bunch of leagues that I could win $36 in, at the end of the season just because it was a cheap league. But they also have some amazing stuff going on too. If you're already in fantasy, you've done your fantasy, but you're a daily fantasy player, well, Underdog's got you covered there too. They do a lot of daily fantasy, and they have this awesome thing. It's prop bet. So what they'll do is they'll put 2 players against each other. So they'll put Mike Evans and Amari Cooper against each other and have a set of stats, and you pick which one is going to have the better stats. There's a lot of fun things going on Underdog Fantasy, and it's technically not gambling, so it doesn't matter what state you're in, you can still participate in those over-unders and those prop bets. So definitely check out that portion of it. But also, I mean, before this, it's too late. Enter that big money pot. Code Pewter to get you a free $25 and put it in that pot, because you could win $1 million. And, you know, I don't know about you. Even after taxes, $1 million sounds pretty good to me, Scott.
I would take $1 million. I would not turn $1 million down. So make sure you head over to Underdog Fantasy, use the promo code Pewter. As we continue on, JC, let's take a look at some of these Cowboys. Well, let's finish up with the stars, right? And Trayvon Diggs, he was a rookie last year, and certainly had an up and down year, right? He showed a lot of promise from an athleticism standpoint. He had 3 interceptions, 12 pass breakups, so he was active. Obviously, he was targeted a lot, right? He's getting that many opportunities to break up the ball and pick it off, but he also gave up 6 touchdowns. So just like every rookie last year, guess what? No preseason. So you go right from a truncated training camp and no rookie minicamp, all that stuff, right into the regular season. And it was a trial by fire. So they're expecting him to play better. I think he's their best cornerback. And you know, we might see him against Mike Evans, Antonio Brown. I think they're going to try to find the best matchup for Diggs that they can. But gosh, you know, you look at some of these other players that are suspect, and guess what? It's a cornerback. It's a cornerback. It's a free safety, right? Yeah. So it's that Dallas secondary that we're going to talk about that's just not very good. So when you look at Jordan Lewis, 3 touchdowns allowed, no interceptions, 2 pass breakups. He's their nickel corner. He's the guy that comes in and plays in the slot typically. He's going to go up against Chris Godwin. So if you're looking for a good fantasy play, assuming Chris Godwin's quad injury, that is not if it's not going to keep him out of the game, which I don't think it will. But that's somewhere to look, right? When you're looking at Godwin versus Jordan Lewis, that is a huge mismatch that favors Tampa Bay.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Mike Evans against Trayvon Diggs, or Antonio Brown against Diggs, even Godwin against Diggs. I think all those are mismatches, and I think Brady's going to be able to pick those guys apart. You're talking about, even though he's a second-year player, you talked about, you know, not having that preseason and offseason, you know, had to learn by fire. Well, it's not like he's not learning by fire now, because you know, they're still learning a brand new defense. This isn't Mike Nolan's defense. This is the first time they're going up against a real 60-minute game performance against a team, and they just happen to draw the luck. You know, that's what you get when you're America's team. You know, they want the ratings, and they're going to get the ratings, but you guys just aren't ready. And it's kind of a shame, because I think this would be a really good matchup if it was later in the schedule. Obviously, the offense brings a ton of, you know, potential tests for the Buccaneers. Even right out the gate, they still do. But I think the defense is going to get better as the season goes on, and it's going to be with those cornerbacks and secondary, you know, having to show that they improve. We kind of outlined the edge rushers; they're good. The linebacking core, you know, the Neal and Parsons are good, but the cornerbacks, they're going to be targeted early and often. And you know, I don't. Even if they go nickel, it's going to be very difficult for them to have one-on-one matchups. And, you know, you're going to have your safeties having to help over the top, which is going to leave other matchups. It's just, as Mitch said in the comments, it's just mismatches galore on this team.
Here's what we're going to see. We're going to see Byron Leftwich come out on the first play of the game, probably run the ball, right? Yes. Rojo up the middle for gain of 2 yards or whatever, right? I mean, it's Bruce Arians, Byron Leftwich, they're going to try to establish the run. This is a game where you might not even need to run the ball, really. This is a game where the cornerbacks, the secondary is so suspect, you take advantage of that. So, listen, if you're going to take advantage of anything, we want you to take advantage of pregame, right here on pewterreport.com and on our Pewter Report YouTube channel. We're going to be having our Pewter pregame show, and we're doing it live on location with John Ledyard and Casey Hudson, and we just hired today. So we're excited to have her aboard, and she's going to be bringing her Bucs analysis to the table, and we're going to be having our Pewter pregame show, streaming live show, that's going to happen right before Pewter Game Day. So if you joined us for Pewter Game Day for the Texans game, we now have Pewter Pregame, which will be from 6 to 8, and then we're going to be picking up, the tab from 8 o'clock to 8:20. So we're going to be having really a 2 hour and 2.5 hour pregame show live from Whiskey Wings. That's in Temple Terrace. They've got tremendous wings, burgers, sandwiches galore. We're going to be having free Pewter Report giveaways, free Pewter Report gear. We've got Celsius on hand that's going to be giving away some stuff. MyBookie has some swag to give away as well. So make sure you join us for the Pewter Pregame Show live on location at Whiskey Wings in Temple Terrace. And then right after that will be Pewter Game Day.
Ooh.
That's going to be from 8:20 all the way through the end of the game. And if you missed the debut of that during the Texans preseason game, what is Pewter Game Day? It's live in-game commentary from John Ledyard, the Pewter Reporters, expert analysis, injury updates. Watch it live on pewterreport.com. That's all you have to do. Log on to pewterreport.com. It will be there. There'll be a video player that will have the entire Pewter pregame and Pewter Game Day shows. Then, of course, followed by the Pewter Report's Pewter Postgame podcast an hour later. So make sure pewterreport.com is where you are if you're not at the stadium on Thursday night.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just at Whiskey Wings with John doing a little bit of a dry run. Man, that place it's big. It's got TVs everywhere. They've got a giant projector screen. I think it's got to be 30 feet long. It's absolutely giant. So it's going to be great to watch games there.
Great
Obviously, atmosphere, drink specials, food specials, and free stuff. I mean, free Celsius. Everyone's talking about Celsius. Get down there. Free.
Come on down and get some
stuff.
free Celsius stuff.
And
Absolutely.
the best part, it's going to kick off this season. With the Buccaneers kicking off the whole NFL. And speaking of kicking off, guess what? Jose B's back, baby.
There you go,
Went
Jose.
through waivers, unclaimed. He's back on the practice squad. Jose
That's
Borregales. Great news. I think they probably would have tried to protect him if he had cleared waivers before 4, but he chose to come back, so that's a good sign. And if anything happens to suck up, I think we're in good hands. Guys look like a stud so far in camp.
Yeah, Luke Rose Award winner from Miami. We're talking about Pewter Report swag. I don't think we have any hats left, but I know you're wearing one. I'm wearing the pewterreport.com gray T-shirt, so you can get some of these free shirts when you visit the Pewter pregame show. And if you want like a little preview of the food, I mean, that's their chicken sandwich. Like that thing's massive. And John had one the other day and said it's phenomenal. So make sure you check us out at Whiskey Wings on Thursday at 6 o'clock for the Pewter pregame show. Let's go back to our Cowboys analysis, shall we? We're going to take a look at we talked about Jordan Lewis being their nickel corner, but they've got this other corner, Anthony Brown, 3 touchdowns allowed, 2 interceptions, a pass breakup last year. Just doesn't make a lot of plays in the ball, and really, like Trayvon Diggs, gave up some plays. This is a younger secondary. Lewis, Diggs, Brown, they're young guys. Dallas kind of trying to do the same thing the Bucs did with Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy-Bunting, Jamel Dean. They just have not progressed nearly as quickly, and maybe they're not as good as we've seen this trio of cornerbacks in Tampa grow up and play a huge role down the stretch, with Sean Murphy-Bunting coming up with those postseason interceptions and just the solid play in keeping Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, Travis Kelce out of the end zone in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and you look at guys like Anthony Brown. I mean, he's the older statesman of the group, and at this point, he is what he is. I don't think there's much to improve on his game. I don't think there's a very high ceiling for him to get better. Obviously, 3 touchdowns allowed. It's not the worst. It could be a lot worse. But the lack of playmaking ability, 2 interceptions, a pass breakup. That's great. But you need to be, if you're the starting outside cornerback, you need to be making more plays than that. And they don't really have anyone else behind them to really promote through the roster as well.
That's right. Yeah, those are their best players. Now you might see a little bit of Maurice Kennedy. He is a nickel cornerback who had a pretty good camp. He could challenge Jordan Lewis, so you might see a little bit of Kennedy in there. He was out of Virginia a couple years ago.
Yeah,
So
and
he's a player that has a little bit more size than Lewis. And listen, I think if Chris Godwin's healthy, Jordan Lewis is going to have his hands full on Thursday night.
oh yeah, and they did draft a guy, Nashawn Wright, this year. 6'4", 185 out of Oregon State. But again, another rookie. So even if you do try to get him out there with that size, it's still a young guy who's hasn't played in the NFL yet,
Yeah.
really, other than preseason, and is learning a new system that's communicating. All these other guys who are still learning the communication and getting that down of a new system. So you really can't trust it. So I mean, up and down, that both safety spots, both cornerback spots, nickel cornerback spot. There's plenty of ways for this Bucs team to take advantage of
Well,
a young
and JC, the last time the Bucs went up against a 6'4" cornerback, it was Kevin King. We know what Mike Evans and Scotty Miller did to him in that first half, right?
Yeah, they bullied him.
Yeah, they did. They were definitely the bullies, no doubt. So rounding out our list, when it comes to the secondary, they've got some problems at free safety, and now they tried to address those problems by getting Malik Hooker. The problem is Hooker, between COVID and injuries, he's really had some struggle staying on the field, and I don't think we're going to see him a whole bunch because he's really behind. That's the word out of Dallas in terms of what this defense is. It's a brand new system, so there's going to be some blown assignments, some missed coverages. You're going to see some mistakes out there, and you just have to hope that Brady can take advantage of those mistakes when he sees them, or make sure he sees those mistakes on the field. And then when he delivers the ball, the guys got to catch it. And if they do, I think you could see points aplenty. But the guy they're going to be sticking in there right now is a guy that Quinn's also very familiar with, Damontae Casey, who is a real feast or famine type player.
Yeah.
He's got a hard time staying healthy, but he's had some opportunities to make interceptions, and he will come up with the ball. But he also will blow some coverages. He played in 4 games in Atlanta last year. He was injured most of the season, went on injured reserve. But he is a feast or famine kind of guy. He's the kind of guy that could be the star of the game and have 2 interceptions, or he could be the GOAT and give up. And we don't mean the Tom Brady GOAT. We mean the bad GOAT. And give up 2 touchdowns in a game.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't really performed at a level. Started 16 games throughout his first 3 seasons, but really hasn't. He's regressed every year, 7 interceptions in 2018, down to 3 interceptions in 2019. Still, as a safety, you're the last line of defense. And we know with that defense that the Falcons have had, it's usually the safeties trying to make the tackle once they get by the linebackers and the defensive line. So, up there in tackles, 70 tackles the last 2 seasons that he played full seasons, not counting last year when he was injured and only held. But, it's still these type of players, they don't have that guy who can really, diagnose and read Tom Brady and what he's going to do. And he's another young guy who's going to get fooled by some of Tom Brady's own disguises and look-offs and et cetera. And, it's going to be a rough day for this Dallas secondary. They really have to hope that the edge rushers and Parsons can really put pressure on Brady to make him get the ball out fast.
I agree.
You're not going to see any coverage sacks, that's for sure.
That's right. From this secondary. That's a great point. So. The thing is this. Do you want to ask your bad secondary to cover for 4 or 5 seconds? No. Do you want to have them cover for maybe a second or 2? That's probably better. The only way that happens is if you apply pressure on Brady and force him to throw the ball quickly. That means blitzing. So I would expect Dallas is going to say, it's pick your poison. Do you want to die quick or die slow? And if I'm Dan Quinn, I'm throwing caution to the wind, and I'm throwing the house at Tom Brady, and I'm going to let the chips fall where they may, because as the Houston Texans found out, you sit back against Tom Brady, and he will surgically strike you and pick you apart and go 90 yards like that with 10 straight completions. Yeah, back to back, and just destroy you. And so I think if I'm Dan Quinn, it's the first game of the season. Don't sit there and leave your corners hung out to dry for 4 or 5 seconds, because AB is getting open. Evans is getting open. Godwin's getting open.
That's the thing. You got. I think you're exactly right. You gotta blitz him and put the pressure on early and throw him off his rhythm early and often. And by doing that, because we've heard quarterbacks say too, and we've heard it. Once you start getting hit, the quarterback starts getting hit. He anticipates the hit, and it can throw him off his game. Now, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time, but he's still not immune to that. So if you can get to him, even if you're not sacking him, if you're hitting him and he feels that pressure is going to be coming, it can get him a little off his game, not to the point where I think they lose the game, but give you an opportunity to make some plays and give that cornerback and safety group a little bit of a break. But I mean, they're going to have to get after him, and we talked about it when we talked about the edge rushers.
Yeah, and by the way, they've got Giovanni Bernard now in third downs, who's much better at the blitz pickup than either Ronald Jones or Leonard Fournette, right? So exactly. I think Tampa Bay can be even more deadly on third down, even when they're being blitzed because of Bernard. Or you put him out there on the screen or a flare pass when Brady's under pressure, a little dump off to Bernard and have him pick up a first down.
How many times have we seen that?
Those chains keep moving, exactly.
I mean, throughout Tom Brady's career, J.R. Redmond, Kevin Falk, Shane Vereen, Danny Woodhead, James White,
Deion Lewis.
Yeah. I mean, that's Tom Brady's bread and fine. You want to blitz me on third and short? Fine, here we go. Giovanni Bernard has been that guy, and as you mentioned, his blitz pickup's tremendous as well. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple long shots on 3rd and 3 if they're put in that position in this game.
Did you say long shots, JC?
I did say long shots.
Well, I'll tell you what. There's a thing called a long shot, and there's a thing called a safe bet. All right. The safe bet is the lock of the season. You like easy money? Thanks to MyBookie and their lock of the season. If either team scores in the NFL season opener in the Tampa Bay Dallas game, you win. I did not stutter. If you didn't know, a game has not ended 0-0 since World War II. So this is the safest, surest bet there is. Head over to mybookie.ag. Select the lock of the season. I've already done it. And if any team scores between the Dallas Cowboys and the Tampa Bay Bucs, you win. The best bet you can make is the one that you can't lose. This is true. I've done this. It's you simply pick, will one of these teams score? And you hit yes, and then you place your bet. It's that simple. MyBookie is also playing host to exclusive contests, including their $100,000 super contest. It only costs $10 to enter. There's big money on the line this season, so don't wait to get in the game. Join now. Head over to mybookie.ag today. Use the promo code PEWTER. Instantly receive double your first deposit, and then they're going to double your funds, and then you're going to double your winnings, right? I mean, that's the whole point. Again, promo code PEWTER to receive double your first deposit and get started with MyBookie today. Bet anything, anywhere, anytime with MyBookie. I had a lot of fun on college football opening weekend. My Kansas State Wildcats kicked the crap out of Stanford. Sorry, John Lynch, but that happened, and I was happy about that. I won money on that. I won money on Georgia over Clemson too. So that was a nice little 1-2 punch for me to start the weekend on MyBookie.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely get on MyBookie and start making some bets, guys, because it's going to be
it's that time of year,
and it's going to be normal on your regular broadcast sooner than you think. Legalized gambling.
And it's interesting too because the Cowboys or the Bucs was 6.5 was the line, and then Zach Martin went out supposedly, and we'll have you kind of restate your news that you were talking about at the top of the show here in a second, but. With news of Zach Martin, all of a sudden that line jumped to 7.5,
which is still way too low.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, I would expect a double-digit win from the Bucs for sure. So what did
Mike McCarthy,
Cowboys coach have to say?
Yeah, Mike McCarthy came out and said that he's still not ruling out Zach Martin 100% as a player who's vaccinated. If you have 2 negative tests in a 24-hour period after each other, you're eligible to come back. So if you are symptom-free, that's the big question. So we know he tested positive for COVID. It depends on if he has symptoms or not. Now, I mean, unless you're a doctor or, he doesn't have a fever or something, it's going to be hard to really prove that he is symptom-free. But, it's still not ruled out that he could come back for this game on Thursday. I think he's going to travel with the team and we'll see kind of what happens and how that plays out. But even if he is back, I think that adds a different element. And we're not talking about the Cowboys offense here, but I'm not too worried about the Cowboys offensive production. I think they've got a really talented offense, but he just adds a different level. And obviously for this Bucs defense, it will be a little bit tougher for them to kind of, do the damage that they're planning on.
I totally agree. And I think too that if there's any way they can get Zach Martin, I think after Mike McCarthy's looking at Vita Vea and Dominic Sue, and and remember Sue had last time he was at Raymond James Stadium in a meaningful game, he had a sack and a half in the Super Bowl. Right? Yeah. So you got old man Sue out there providing some pass rush. I actually was the leading sacker in the Super Bowl. So I think that if I'm Mike McCarthy, I lie, cheat, steal, do whatever I can to get Zach Martin out there because they're going to need him. Not just for Ezekiel Elliott, but to keep Dak Prescott upright. So
yeah, you got to protect your financial investment in Dak Prescott. You put all that money into him, and when you put an investment like that into your quarterback, you have to make sure you're doing the right thing to protect him.
JC, man, you're the ultimate setup guy. We're like Hedman and Stamkos here on the fast break and hockey. I mean. You're setting up all these segues for me for commercials here. So here's one from Amuni Financial. They're one of our newest sponsors.
At Amuni Financial, we help you live in the now.
Congratulations. We're so happy for you.
Thank you.
And even though the now may feel very different, you still need to plan for the future.
How's retirement treating you? Oh, just fantastic.
I know I say it all the time, but you really got to come up to Colorado.
Let's do it. All right. Yeah.
We can help you develop that plan to keep you on track, so you can still prepare for tomorrow, today. Amuni Financial. Plan ahead, stay ahead.
Amuni Financial, that is right. They're one of our newest sponsors here on the Pewter Report podcast. I'm also one of the newest investors with Amuni Financial. And at Amuni, they've been doing this for 40 years, proudly serving clients across the country since 1980, offering advisory services, brokerage services, legacy and retirement planning, investment banking, insurance services, annuities, sales and trading. The biggest thing you want to do is enjoy the present. And you can do that by planning for the future. An ideal future can mean different things to different people. That's why they believe in a collaborative planning process where your input directs their action. Helping you achieve your financial goals is their top priority over at Amuni Financial. Visit them at Amuni, AMUNI.com.
Yeah, so just like the Dallas Cowboys are protecting their financial future, you guys should too. Could definitely go check them out.
Let's we have a super chat here we want to get to. Just got here, fellas. I see the Godwin was added to the injury report. Man, people are freaking out about Chris Godwin with this quad. He was limited today. We don't know much more other than that because I guess when Bruce Arians spoke, the injury report hadn't come out, so we weren't privy to that information, but. I would suspect, knowing Chris Godwin and how tough he played. I mean, he played with a broken finger
taped up
last year, right? So I doubt that the quad injury is going to keep him out unless it was a tear or something, which I don't think was the case. We'd probably find out about that by now if it was something serious. So we'll see. We'll have more on that on PeterReport.com and also Matt and John tomorrow on the Peter Report podcast. We'll talk about that as well.
Yeah, for sure. I think one thing, Scott, is soft tissue injuries. Now, I have Bucs fans scarred. So, when they hear something like that, quad, hamstring, they're like, oh, my goodness, what's going to happen? Is it going to be a lingering issue throughout the entire season? But one thing to note, too, is, the Bucs are very strategic. Now that we're in the regular season, we don't get full access to, like we did at training camp. We just get the first 30 minutes of practice, and they will wait and linger and roll those players out so you can't tell who's out, who's not, who's stretching, who's practicing. A lot of the first unit is some individual drills, usually by offensive, defensive linemen, and then special teams work. And Godwin's not on special teams, so we're not going to see him. So I know some people were like, did you guys see what happened or anything like that? But no, I mean, they're smart. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. So, it's different than it was like under Dirk Cutter, for example, because Dirk Cutter would have his press conference after practice. The practices were in the afternoon. So you would he would come in and sometimes talk about the injury report, right? So you're kind of getting some fresh information there. Other coaches do it differently. Bruce has the earlier practices. He talks immediately after practice. They don't put the injury report out until around 3:30, 4 o'clock. So you don't have the opportunity really to ask about some injuries. Sometimes Bruce will be forthcoming, but the only thing he really said today was that Jordan Whitehead was out. So I think that means that we are going to see Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, even though Brown didn't participate and Godwin was limited. I still think we're going to see those guys play. It's opening weekend.
Oh yeah, they're playing, especially Godwin and AB, both in contract years. So
yeah,
you want to get those stats, baby. You want to get paid.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, listen, we got a big show for you guys tomorrow. It'll be our last show before the Pewter pregame and Pewter game day here on PewterReport.com. Of course, followed by the Pewter postgame podcast. But we got Matt and John talking about the Dallas Cowboys offense and how the Bucs defense is going to match up against that. So we spent a lot of time today talking about Dallas's depleted, deficient D and lack thereof, and how the Bucs will probably go to attack that. Again, I think you're going to see a lot of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers with Gronk and 1 running back, and we'll see. They're going to mix it up, but I think that's going to be the staple, because you want to have as many of those wide receiver cornerback mismatches as Bruce Arians and Byron Leftwich can create.
I mean, we might see a lot of pre-snap motion, something that the Bucs haven't done since the bye week too. So get ready for that. If you're Byron Leftwich, who says it doesn't happen, but yeah, I mean, it's going to be, this team. Obviously, we saw kind of what happened in that last preseason game. Into the first drive, kind of stalled out, but expect more of the second and third drive with this team. If they have to go no huddle, they will. This is a game that counts. So they're going to roll out different things that we haven't seen, different looks. And it's really going to be difficult for, as we discussed in full, this Dallas defense to really contain and keep up.
And JC, we're going to roll out another edition of the Pewter Report podcast tomorrow, again with Matt Matera and John Ledyard. For JC Allen, I am Scott Reynolds, saying thank you for joining us on this edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.